Hello, bonjour, and welcome to the Don't Waste Water podcast. I'm your host, Antoine Walter, and in today's episode, I am thrilled to welcome Nicola Lei Ravello as my guest. Nicola is the founder of White Stag Investing, but also a head of research at the Ocean Assets Institute, an asset raiser for Oxygen, and an ESG research analyst. In our discussion, we will focus on the underlying link between all these activities, sustainable investing, with, of course, a special focus on the water industry. Nicola will explain to us how finance could unlock something in the water sector and help it to grow and get better, and how the four layers of the water industry might be appealing to different investor profiles in isolation or as a portfolio. He'll tell us why we probably shouldn't be afraid of significant investment funds entering the water landscape, and in the same time, how there is still a long way to go for the sector to be valued as it should. You'll hear me repeat during the conversation that this is not investment advice, but you shall definitely invest in this week's episode, which is full of golden nuggets. Nicola addresses the market listing of water futures, the ideal balance between conservatism and entrepreneurial mindset, finance as a catalyst for change, how investment is pretty similar to engineering, or the path to product market fit. We will be taking off in a second, but I have to ask you for a little hand in spreading the word right before. Please, if you do like this podcast, tell your friends, share this episode with at least 2 people. The more, the better. And if there's anything you don't like about the show or a topic you'd like us to cover, just drop me a word, ideally on LinkedIn. Do it, share it, we'll meet on the other side.
You're listening to Don't Waste Water, the podcast that helps water professionals to improve their wastewater treatment, optimize their operation costs, and keep up with the latest market trends. This podcast is brought to you by GF Piping Systems. As a leading supplier of piping systems made of plastics and metal, GF Piping Systems is the global expert for the safe and reliable transportation of water, chemicals, and gas. For more information, visit gfps.com.
So hi, Nicola. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Antoine. Thank you for inviting me.
Let's start, like the usual, with a postcard. And actually, your postcard comes from a place which is close to my heart. You're in Zurich right now. So what can you tell us crispy about Zurich?
Well, it's close to my heart too. I've been here for 10 years. I mean, there's so much things to do here. It's very lively, and you can go to nature, you can go in the city for culture, you can go wherever. In terms of crispiness, lately with the COVID, it was not best. But we had 4 different types of weather since yesterday. So I guess this is as crispy as it gets now.
Actually, I don't want to populate the cliche that only financial and banking people are living in Zurich. But somehow...
Yeah, well, I mean, all finance people live in Zurich, but all not people in Zurich are in finance. This kind of a causality, you know.
Actually, I was looking at your path.
Yeah.
And your path, if you allow me, this image starts with the perfect picture one would make from someone working in finance. And then apparently something weird happened to you and you got interested in weird topics like sustainability, environment, water. Can you guide us through your steps?
Is that really weird? Yeah, I mean, yeah. I don't know. I mean, I've started my career in finance. I've been working 10 years in really deep, high finance, doing investment analysis, risk analysis, portfolio analysis. So really telling people how to invest, you know. And after a long time in that, you know, like in my last job, I was just looking at the screen, and with, you know, markets, everything was going left and right. And I was like, yeah, I could not really sense what was the use of all of this, you know, like just trying to make money here and then. And yeah, I decided to leave my job and go on a different path. And since then, since 3 years, I've kind of followed passions in sustainability. So especially more in water. And I've tried to check or see, or how can I apply my finance skills and my passion for nature together and try to come up with something with that, you know.
How does that translate business-wide? What do you do today?
So the way I started is like, Actually, I started to look at the SDGs as a roadmap, and I tried to understand what is like the common denominator in all SDGs. What is the
Sustainable Development Goals.
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, that's like the roadmap from the UN to see which kind of like the big development challenge the world is facing, And I was trying to find like on a common denominators, like how can you have as much impact to all these challenges, and where could finance be the most useful, So where could I apply my financial skills at best, And for me, after looking at this, it kind of became pretty clear that it would be water, because first, for example, education. I mean, that's a great development challenge. It would be great if you have more of that. But from a finance perspective, it's not like you can just pour money in it, that then we're going to have people educated. That's a big political process, like educational process, that I don't think finance can help a lot. Whereas water, I felt that by looking at all the investment, that if we can show the value that you can bring there, then it could unlock something, And then suddenly you have all the resources of the finance world could go to the water sector and somehow help it grow or get better,
So finance is a vector to a mission. Somehow you aim at the impact, but can you convince people that also investing in water might be something which is good regardless of the impact it might have?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it really falls on a spectrum, like in sustainable investing, we have like traditional finance on one side and you have philanthropy on the other side, so whether you only care about money or whether you only care about impact. Actually, now everything is kind of mixed up somewhere in between, So some investors prefer to look directly at once like traditional performance with some sort of impact and the other way around. So for me, I kind of see that as different tools I can use and apply and see how I can help different investors access the team. So how to go into water and kind of use these resources there. So you would get some financial performance, you would get some impact on its own, and somehow the resources would get redirected in the right direction.
I have an outsider question here. What is an investment research firm?
Basically, I provide intel to investors. So let's say you have 10 billion francs. You need a good reason to invest in something, right? So that's kind of where I come in. I said, okay, you want to go in the water sector? I'm going to provide an analysis of all the challenges, all the risks, all the opportunities, all the trends, all the factors, what you should care about, what you should be careful about. And then I'm going to dive in each every investment and make a case, of why you should put your money there and not you. So yeah, it's really providing basically research for them to justify why they would invest in that.
So one could have guessed that that's going to be our deep dive today. We're going to be focusing on this investing in water. And the cool thing for me is that I can finally say that sentence, that you hear in podcasts, that you see in every LinkedIn post you do. It's just a disclaimer on the bottom. So for once, I can do that. I can tell that sentence. So this is not investment advice. It's not an offer or solicitation to buy any financial services or financial instruments. And now that I've told that, I feel like I have
feel better
clue about that.
Like all the reason.
Yeah, there was a kind of noise last December around the water now being traded in Wall Street.
Yeah.
And, the water sector is not full of financial professionals. And all of a sudden we were in the spot and thinking, hey, what we do is now traded in the world's biggest stock exchange. But what does that actually really mean?
Actually, water is not traded per se on Wall Street. What is traded is its future price. So that's the difference between a spot and a future price. It's actually like pretty much all commodities and other precious metals. It's not like you can go to a bank and buy 10,000 barrels of oil, but you can buy a delivery of 10,000 barrels of oil in 6 months or in 12 months or in 24 months. So that if you need oil for your business in this time frame, you're going to get it, So that's, you pay the delivery in this horizon for the price of today. So it's going to be the same for water, actually. So, but instead of we call like a physical delivery, it's going to be a cash delivery. So you just get the money to buy the water at this time in the future.
It sounds a bit like an insurance.
Definitely, 100%. I mean, I could give you an example. For example, it could be let's say you take like a microbrewery in California, right? These guys need water to craft their IPAs. But with the droughts going on, they might not be sure to get this kind of water, So in the following years. So what they can do is can actually go to the exchanges and get a water delivery contract. So they buy the water today to be delivered in 2 years. So they actually know that they're going to have the money to buy the water they need in 2 years. So it's really like an insurance that provides business stability,
That's a positive way to look at it. I was reading an article this morning published by the University of Miami. They were arguing against considering water as a commodity because if the prices of oil really go above the roof, then you can invest a bit more in exploration and dig out more oil to solve that. Whereas water is a finite resource. What we could also be discussing, because you could also invest in desalination, bring more water inside the cycle. But if you look at it with a positive eye, it gives insurance and safety on the long run. If you look at it with a negative eye, it might be a door open to speculation, or really from an outsider perspective, what I'm saying might be making zero sense. So please correct me.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I think it's definitely a justified fear, because I mean that's what we've been seeing into food commodities, like soybeans or coffees that attracted speculators, and the price would just go up and down and up, and then it just completely changes livelihoods in the countries producing it, So I think it's a valid concern. I mean, I kind of looked into these water futures, and the way they kind of structured it, it's going to be the average price of different sources of water, and this somehow makes it a bit more robust. And also that the price of water is usually regulated. So it's not like there's going to be some economic floors and economic ceiling, So I think this can provide some boundaries on this too, or actually avoid the worst part of speculation.
Actually, you mentioned that the price of water is regulated, and I read your various publications on the matter. Just to be clear, you are investing in the sector, not in water itself.
Yes,
that was my introduction to lure you in. But
yeah.
So let's talk of the sector. And this regulation of the prices, you mentioned it as something which might be frightening investors because there's no big profit to make in a regulated industry. But on the other hand, you also mentioned that brings this stability. It's always going to be resilient. Is that the first reason to invest in the sector?
I mean, it all depends what kind of investor you are. If you're looking at just making a lot of money in very little time, then you probably should not go there. But if you're a pension fund that needs to invest the savings and the retirement money of pretty much a 1 million person, then it makes sense to go into a market or an investment where the fluctuation of the price is pretty low, because that provides stability to your investment, And a lot of insurance and pension funds actually need that because they do what we call an asset liability management. So they forecast in the next 50 years how much money they need to pay to everyone. And the more stability or the less volatility you have in those income streams, the more security you have to make sure that you pay those guys, So that's quite attractive for big investors.
I like the way that you picture the water sector with these 4 layers. I'm going to paraphrase you, so stop me if you want to do it better. But the bedrock is really the utility. There's the industry, the IT, and the healthcare. Here we are talking of the utility level.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is that this is ideal if you're a conservative investor for structural reasons. Does that mean that the optimal investment is a mix of all of those, or is really different kind of investors' profiles? Or
I think it really depends. I mean, it really depends what kind of investor you are, People think usually just banks or just pension funds, they're just one type of investor, but usually it's more like an ecosystem, You have investors that are interested in really long-term money, investors that want cash flows now. The way I kind of see it, what's making it really interesting for me is that, as you correctly said, the water sector is defined across these 4, I would say, financial sectors. So industrial, providing the hardware, IT, providing the software, utilities, providing the servicing of the system, and healthcare providing the treatment. And this makes it really interesting from a financial perspective, because all these businesses, they're all different businesses, they drive on different economic currents, they drive on different economic needs. So their cash flow and their revenues and their profitability is going to be somewhat different. From a financial portfolio perspective, this is interesting because suddenly you tap in 4 different type of businesses with their own income streams, and then you can create somehow a financial portfolio that is robust, because if for example, an economic storm arrives on once, then at least you have the 3 others that are still standing. So you lose less money.
So again, with this mixed way to look at things, positive and
negative. Yeah. Yeah.
It means that when you see a news which says that 2.2 billion people will be facing water scarcity, what you see is also that business is here to stay, because we need water for those people.
Yes. I mean, at the end of the day, it is a strategy, because you're going to have a lot of people that are going to be facing poverty, but at the same time, you need a solution, right? And you need to try to frame that in a positive way to try to gathering momentum in this solution, to make something happen. So, and I think that's the power of finance, because as soon as people start seeing value into something, stuff happen and things change.
That also draws on a difference between prices and value. If you talk to people in the street and you ask them what's the price of water, they're going to tell you it's too expensive. We should not pay for it. Come on, water is nature. Why do you have to pay for nature? And on the other hand, there's no life without water, so the value goes through the roof.
It's. I think we could spend an entire day talking about this. It's it's almost a philosophical question, The big thing I would say about this is one problem I think we're seeing in the water sector is that's something I read about the water valuation, It needs to be low enough to make sure everyone can access it and it stays a human right, but it needs to be high enough to make sure we don't waste it, We make sure we make as many drop counts. So that creates a big economic conundrum, At the end of the day, I think we're going to face an economic reality that water is going to be a challenge, You need to find solutions to keep the social and spiritual value of water, but you need also to make sure that it goes where it's needed. So I think it's a really tough challenge.
So that's the bedrock, really. The utilities here to stay, and we will always need water. If we go now one step up in that pyramid, we have the industry. Here, I get as well that probably if you need water on the utility level, you need people to deliver the pieces for that water. But now the pieces of pipe, the pieces of treatment processes, and so far and so on. But here, you could see bigger growth. I had, for instance, on the same microphone, Gilad Yogev from Fluence talking about MABR. MABR is a process which was not existing 10 years ago. Nowadays, it's booming. So if you're an industrial investing in a MABR worldwide, you're going to experience growth. But on the other hand, that process is replacing another process. So if you're the supplier of that other process, your financial risk is much higher because you can get disrupted.
100%. I think that's the reality of any market or any business, And that's how I think innovation is driven across any industry. If you're water investors and you want to try to stay invested in the top performing industries, then you need to stay active. It's not like you can just buy these companies and go on the beach for 20 years. You somehow need to make sure that those companies are still good business. They're still performing well. They're still delivering the client what the client needs. So you need to some sort of follow up, because if you invest in a company and in 5 years they change direction, it changed board direction, then it's not the same company anymore.
When you say investing in the company, do you mean how can I figure that? Is it really you love that company and you invest in that company, or is it really part of a portfolio and you're investing a bit in all of those?
Again, it really depends what kind of investor you are. If you're a retail investor, it could be that you just love this company, you invest in it. If you're a more institutional investors, you want to if we talk the example of the institutionals again, so those are pension funds that need to make sure they have a stable stream of income coming for the next 100 years, because they need to pay the retirement of everyone. For example, they need to make sure that in 50 years, they have at least 20 years of stable income. So suddenly this becomes a problem for now, And my whole point is that, water companies, I think they're going to be the companies dealing with all the problems of climate change. They're going to need to adapt the system, the infrastructure, revamp the system, coming with new innovation, with new growth potential. That's a whole ecosystem dynamic. I'm talking about the big picture together, And this somehow make it an asset for society, because the water sector, the water industry is going to be the guys that's going to fix that. So I think that's precious. And the way the industry is structured makes it actually a perfect long-term investment. If you're catching my my drift.
You mentioned the way the industry is structured. Actually, that was something that surprised me in what you put together, is that you see this fragmentation of the market as an asset. And it's true that if there's an industry which is fragmented, our water industry surely is that industry. It's the typical example. The world leader, Veolia, has 3% market share, and I think that the second one, Suez, has 2%. So it's like, to us, those guys are giants, but compared to the market, they are dwarfs.
Yeah. I think that's a good thing, because you have other markets where you have an oligarchy, you have three guys that decide everything. That creates a lot of problems on its own. For a finance guy, it means less leverage, because they can do whatever they want. They're going to get the money anyway. This means also less diversification, if you invest across the entire water sector, this is more like 150, 200 companies. If one goes bust, then it's not the end of the world, If you have three companies and if one goes bust, that's a big problem. So yeah, I see that as definitely as resilience for the industry.
It's an interesting way to look at it. It makes sense.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, you mentioned also the need for innovation, and I would expect from a fragmented market to be very innovative, because competition should be kind of really, really strong, and so pushing the market forward.
I would expect that too.
But if I believe my personal experience, and actually all the people that were at that same microphone shared that comment at some point in the interview, we are really working in a conservative industry. How can you have this dichotomy between competition that should be pushing us to do better, and on the other hand, we really stay with what we know for 20 years, 30 years?
That's an excellent question, My guess is that, as I wrote in my article today, is that water is basically a basic need service, So it's not like you can be very experimental with your innovation. So I think for the right reasons, you're going to have processes that make sure that quality is ensured and safety is ensured at whatever the cost is. At least in my, from what I've seen from a finance perspective. I don't know what's your more engineer beyond that. And the other aspect I've seen talking with other water investors, it's actually the same problem with, I think, other utilities and actually with pension funds in the investment world, is that utilities and pensions, they're kind of governed by older generations that are not, I would say, the most savvy or the most willing for change, and this can be some sort of a barrier to more innovation. And then when a new generation of new young guy comes in, they want to make a change, they want to implement their own things, their own tools, and that can be a driver for innovation.
So we are too serious as an industry to be innovative.
You can put it that way. Whether that's good or bad, I don't know.
No, it's true that, it leaves a lot of imagination to even picture a disruption of the water sector. I didn't stumble personally upon the Uber of water treatment. Might come one day, but I'm not sure if it's only a generational topic, because it's an easy explanation. I get it, and it makes absolutely sense. But sometimes, I give you my example, which
Yeah, please do.
When I was in engineering school, I never thought of disrupting anything. To me, I learned how to do it the good way, and I was just I was told how to apply it, and it was never put inside my mindset. Again, we are serious. We are, being innovative and crazy. That's the thing for people working in IT or finance, probably. Uh, we are dealing with nature. We have to be humble. So let's be conservative.
I think that's a great philosophy. I think in finance probably the opposite. Like we learn how to to be disruptive. It's really like like pool. You try when you play pool, you go a big shot in the beginning, explode everything, and see what you can make out of that. So you asked me good questions through email before, like saying the recent interest of big private equity players in the water industry, like Ardian or Meridian. And I think that could be some sort of catalyst for innovation. Those guys, they invest basically in the social utilities of the world. So that's like renewable energy, that's like roads, that's like airports. So basically any kind of service humanity needs. And if they start getting interested in it, that's means value for them. And usually when they come somewhere, they come with the money and the determinations to upgrade and change stuff, So that could be another catalyst of how things could change and we could see some sort of improvement in the industry.
Again, that's a very positive way to look at it.
Yeah. I try to keep them around.
Well, I have to be the devil's advocate today. So
Please do.
There's another way to look at those big funds coming into water, which is, water, if you don't touch it, it's a cash cow. You just operate what's working. You keep it running at the bare minimum. And the day the asset is really, really in a poor shape, you expect the state to take it back and to repair it. I'm not being really, really negative.
Yeah, that's...
If you look, all these Ardian, Meridian topics came along the possible merger between Suez and Veolia.
Yeah,
and that was a big fear from the employees of those big groups to say, hey, if we go into finance the devil, probably that means that we are going to cut the costs, be less innovative, and really try to milk out the companies as much as possible.
I don't think... I'm going to be the angel advocate. I don't know what's... yeah. It really depends the kind of investor, Like my opinion on Ardian, for example, those guys are really long-term investors. They're long-term infrastructure. They need their things to work in the next 50, 100 years, So they're going to put sustainability, the real concept of sustainability, like make sure that everything is runs for the long term at the heart of their investment strategy and their innovation thing. So it's not like they're going to... You have hedge funds. That's the only things they do. They come somewhere, they see a weak prey, try to kill it and extract as much money, what is possible. That's my opinion, what is being done with Danone at the moment. I don't know if you follow that story. But obviously, it's I think it's obviously a concern, because it's a change in paradigm. But I think then you can try to find some sort of compromise between private and public solution, At the one hand, you need the conservatism to keep people employed and keep the safety. And on the other hand, you need some sort of entrepreneurial spirit to make sure that you need the necessary innovation to stay on the top of quality,
We mentioned Ardian and Meridian. There's a third fund which is in the news lately, which is Equity. They bought Innovise in 2017 for $240 million, I think, at the time, and they just sold it to Autodesk for $1 billion 4 years later. So you multiply it by 4 in 4 years. Sounds like, here we're not speaking of a good father's investment, over 20 years, but like a really interesting, it's a crazy return on investment when you think of it.
Yeah, it's a good, that's, if you look at that from a evolution, innovative perspective, those guys saw an opportunity, they saw a technology with potential, they financed it, they pushed it, and now it's been adapted by a big company. So somehow the innovation was integrated, and for that they basically got paid 5 times the money, So again, that's kind of my perspective of how finance can be a catalyst for change. obviously there's going to be a lot of people making money out of it. But if at the end of the day you get an upgraded water system, it might be a good thing, you know.
A win-win.
Oh yeah.
Well, that brings us in the third layer of your pyramid, because here we are into IT with Innovize, but also probably there are much other examples than Innovize. And what you're describing here with EQT sounds almost like venture capital.
It is. It 100% is, you know. I mean, I've screened the venture capital space in water. I've seen around 20 funds that they do only that. They try to be a really catalyst. The investment strategy for ventures is totally different than for pension funds. So if you're private equity, you're looking at for 15, 20 companies. You try to map out the innovation process in a given industry. You see where the big bottlenecks, and you try to see what kind of solutions can fix those bottlenecks. Then you make a portfolio of these 20 companies, and all of them actually, they usually expect like one or two to be successful. So they're actually going to be paid by just one being successful, and all the rest, they just lose the money. So even if they make 5 times the money, they probably lost half of it by trying other crazy ideas that engineers were pretty happy to try to implement, you know.
So at which stage do we speak of investment here? Is it, venture capital could be you find a guy with a cool idea and you fund him. So it really at seed level.
That's even before, you know, that's like pre-seed.
Okay.
So there are funds that have a cooperation program with universities. They go talking with all the young engineers, or they're not even engineers yet, and try to see what kind of ideas or crazy solutions they have. And if they find one that is good, they're going to give it some money to try it out.
But I mean, that's the model we know with famous dropouts from school with like Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates. But you know, it's that's that permanent question I have, and which I've been raising many times at that microphone. It's is hypergrowth something which is possible within the water industry? Because for sure there are software as a service companies. They are really cool things, cool companies, cool concepts, really aiming at disrupting and solving bottlenecks, like you just said. But on the other end, it's still that conservative market. And yeah, I guess I was playing the devil advocate against finance here, but I think when I'm doing that, it's a popular opinion within the water industry. We see finance more as an enemy rather than as an ally, which it should be, I guess. And I think you show it.
I think that's what I'm trying to show as well. You know, I mean, look, there's valid reasons for people to be not trustworthy of finance. I mean, with what happened in the last great financial crisis, I mean, so many things went wrong. We could spend 2 hours talking about this, you know. But at the end of the day, you know, like the economy and finance is really, again, an ecosystem of different type of people, you know. So, and all they can have the usefulness into the innovation process, you know. So you can have ventures capital that are just, they can either care about the technology and to be the guy that solve how to create salt water to fresh water without energy, or that kind of stuff, and be the biggest guy in the room. It can be a guy that wants to just make a lot of money. So that would be the venture kind of archetype of people, you know. But just putting the money into that, it catalyzes an idea and make it somewhat a reality, you know, and that provides dynamism, economic dynamism to the system that creates growth and innovation. On the other end of the spectrum, you're going to have institutional investors which have trillions to invest and they want stability. And there they're going to make pools of money by investing in the big water companies at the very top level, like the industrials, the utilities. And this is going to be a big part of the financing as well.
How can I envision your role? I mean, you are similar people doing the same thing than you do. Is it like being an intermediate between those people with the technology and the people with the money, or the people with the ideas and the people with the market? Or what's your mission?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. At the end of the day, you can see me as an engineer as well, you know, an investment engineer or like an economic engineer. So there's a client comes, a venturist, that has been, I don't know, investing in food, and now he wants to do in water. He wants to invest at the very beginning of the innovation process, or the value chain. So pre-seed those seeds, and I would help him like, okay, what are the key solutions which I think could be the game changers in all the bottlenecks of the industry, and then I would help him to create a portfolio of this, and then he could be successful at financing one and maybe losing 10. So I'm helping him designing this portfolio construction. That's what I kind of meant when I'm an engineer. It could be a pension funds that wants to invest 5%, which still represent billions, on choosing the best water funds or the best water stocks to make sure that the allocation of different companies is as stable as possible, So that's kind of where I come in.
The reason why I'm asking is that you mentioned this engineering aspect, and if you look at the water industry, wherever you are aiming at, it's engineers. I mean, sales guys are engineers, marketing guys are engineers, and that has lots of pros, I guess, because it means at many stages of the pyramid, we have people understanding the matter of water. It also comes with the cons. You see marketing campaigns built around nice features like my pumping capabilities, when probably you shall tell a story instead. And I guess I'll give you another personal example here. I remember one of the first projects I was working on, we lost it. So it was tender phase, everything. We lost it. And I was discussing with another engineer which was working on the project. And the guy was sincerely asking me, how could we lose? We had the best process. So the best wins. The best shall always win. And actually, no, the market decided to go somewhere else. And if you don't understand the market, then your chances to reach product market fit, to use the big names, that doesn't exist. And I would see that as something coming in the way of potential water startups, because they might have awesome technology, but
if nobody wants it, then yeah, I think that's the classical. You can have a perfect solution, but if you have not any problems to use it, then it's pretty useless, And it's interesting you mentioning that, because I read an article recently that exactly everyone in the water industry is pretty much engineers, and that's kind of restrained the cognitive diversity of how people think. Like we're having these conversations and we have totally different way of seeing things, And I believe through our interaction, we can somehow come in the middle ground and trying to find something new, So I'm also a big believer in that kind of trying to group different kind of people together and see what they can come up with together.
I wonder if sometimes people even try to come with fully disruptive idea. Let's take a very stupid analogy, like incredibly stupid, and I'm already sorry for that. You see the hotels. There are hotels everywhere. Yeah. So it's a fully fragmented market. And then you have a booking who comes and says, hey, I do a platform. You no longer have to book a room because you do everything through my platform. They take a big chunk of the market. I mean, that story is before COVID, but let's say we're still before COVID. And I'm wondering why nobody, for instance, ever tried in the water industry to say, hey, it's highly fragmented. You could be doing everything. What if you didn't care at all and you come to bookmywatertreatment.com and I take this big chunk? I mean, it's a stupid example, but just to say, sometimes we're a bit doomed to come with faster horses instead of coming with a car.
I mean, did you try to do that?
No.
I don't know. I mean, to be honest, I'm not as specialized in water treatment yet as you are. So my first opinion on this would be, I think there's more regulations and barriers in the water industry than there is in the hotel industry. So that's also some hurdles to innovation.
You mentioned regulation. It's an interesting one because you see regulation as an opportunity. For instance, the US regulating the PFAS is an opportunity. Whereas, again, from my negative point of view, regulation is something which really comes in the way of liberal investment, and sounds like, two opposites.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's, that for every risk, you have an opportunity on the other side. So as we discussed before, that, I mean, the regulation on the price of water can be bad for speculators because they're not making enough money. But it's actually a good thing for institutional investors that want stability in their performance, Here on PFAS, that's going to be a problem for a lot of industrials because suddenly they have to take care of their water treatment, But for the people that design the membranes that's going to do that, that's a good news, So again, if you keep an market ecosystem perspective, always things are changing and moving, and then you have new players coming in and trying to basically they make their own business model, their own growth, innovation, and that kind of things. So yeah, I mean that's kind of my point. Like if a business or company lose somewhere, then you have a new company that is disrupting those things and winning somewhere else.
So now I'm going to change side, and I'm with you now.
Sure. I'm happy to turn the table.
We've seen that there's a steady potential and booming potential. Water is a topic which is here to stay. There's water scarcity, lots of wastewater. I mean, 4/5 of the wastewater today is not treated. So there's something to do here. We see that big funds come in, make crazy return on investment because there is also that new IT scene. I had the Elemental Accelerator on that microphone. We were discussing about those startups and bringing them to the next step. And they have a churn rate which is below 10%. So really, it's not investing in 20 companies to have one that succeeds and 19 that die out. It turns out that in the water sector, you can invest in 20 companies and have 18 that go to the next level, maybe not to become Booking or Uber or Facebook, but still which are profitable, which reach profitability. So why don't all investors turn to the water sector and bomb it with money? Because that's the best investment there will be. And
I think they just don't know about it yet. I mean, that's kind of why I started my business. I wanted to show that there's so much things to be done here, and there's so much finance can do, and there's so much opportunities. So basically, my job is trying to show that, by writing this article, by coming to you and talking about this, by trying to see things under a new light and a new perspective. Then I try to share that with other investors, and somehow things can move forward, and somehow the resources of the finance can come to the water industry. On a huddle note, I would say that you also have to take into account that global equity markets are just going up all the time now. I mean, the thing is just crazy, just one big spike. So if you're a short-term investor, it's heaven for you now. So you don't really need a reason to go anywhere else. Then it comes about a lot of different topics in the economy, about central banking, liquidity, and everything that is happening to support the economy at the moment. So, and that's also one of my points that, I mean, this kind of short-term market momentum we are seeing at the moment, I don't think that's going to last forever, because it's so based on price inflation, on the valuation. I think a bit less on the profitability of the underlying investment. But my point is that if you go into the water industry with all this potential, then this potential can become an insurance and a guarantee of something that is away from the markets, And that's interesting for investors, because if you just hooked on the markets, then if it falls, you're gonna fall with it. But if you're somewhere else, if 30% of your portfolio is in water companies, then the market goes down, and obviously the water industry is gonna. If everything tanked, the water industry is gonna tank as well, I think. But somehow it's a bit differentiated. So that's kind of the approach I try to convey.
Well, I think a good example of that is what happened with COVID. I'm pretty sure that the water industry was at least stable over the time. It didn't disappear. I mean, people were still drinking water, still flushing the toilet.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, in terms of protection, utilities their prices were quite robust, quite resilient. They don't drop as much as as other investments. So this is some sort of protection for investors. On the industrial side, I saw that some contract got delays, but I mean, they all pretty much on industrials, they kind of revise their forward guidance, what's going to happen in their industrials book for next year. But so far, I think things are gathering momentum again.
So short-term investors don't yet need water because they have other playgrounds. How would you define the long term? What is long term in terms of finance? Is it 2 years? Is it 20 years? 1 century?
That's a good question. For me, long term is really 20 years and plus 5. You can even say 5 or 10. But again, using the analogy of institutional investors or insurance, those guys, they base their whole entire investment strategy on the next 100 years, I don't know about all of them. Some may have different time horizon. But again, if you're a pension and you need to pay the retirement money of someone in 50 years, then you need to make sure that you're going to have this money, And suddenly this becomes a problem for today. So you need to make the right decision today. That's what I would qualify as a long-term investor.
So it's still not investment advice, but if you have one thing that people underlook when they look at the water sector as financial investors, what is the thing that they don't catch?
For me, I think the most exciting thing is a nature-based solution. How you can use the power of nature for different aspects. I saw, for example, last year that the Central Arkansas utility issued a green bond and used the proceeds to buy the surrounding forest around these utilities, So that would preserve the natural filtration process of water and protect its water from urban development, So I think that makes a lot of business sense, strategic sense, and that's pretty cheap and less costly because you don't have to create an entire infrastructure to clean the water because you just save the nature. So I think everything in that direction, like wetlands or like sponge cities, that's pretty exciting.
Sponge cities. It's a pity that you use that keyword now because it is 1 hour. But that's a note to myself. One day I have to schedule that 1 hour about sponge cities.
Cool. I think it's pretty exciting topic.
And what's the perception of your peers? I mean, now people coming from the financial world, when you come and you say, hey, have a look here, it's interesting for green reason, for meaningful reason, probably, but also for financial reason. Are you seen as an outsider, or is it really something which is also moving in that field?
That's a very interesting question. People see it more and more seriously. Like I got some friends or other people there, pure finance guys, and start listening a lot, So they definitely see the interest and the value in that.
I was discussing, preparing for, I hope, a future interview with Jeremy Thomas of LinkedIn. If you're listening to this, hi Jeremy. And if you want to have a look at what he's publishing, he has a hashtag on LinkedIn which is Let's Talk Water. And
it's French as well, no?
He is partly French.
Yeah. Okay.
And when we were discussing that, he was waiting for startup accelerators, venture capitalists enter the water topic in Europe. He was seeing that in the US and he was expecting it to come in Europe. And finally, it turns out that that starts to bubble out. So finally, his prediction is becoming true. So startup studio accelerators are created in Europe. So usually we are the laggards compared to the US. But there's also something interesting, which you quoted as well, which is that the water sector comes usually some years after the energy sector. Like if you want to see our future, we have a look at the energy sector and we see what's coming to the water sector. Do I understand it right here? So if I'm looking at the energy sector in the US, I see the long-term future of the water sector in Europe.
I didn't really frame it like this, but it's, I would say so. I mean, it's the same idea that, we had so much discussion around climate change and carbon emissions and rising temperatures. But the environmental problems go much deeper than just energy. What kind of energy you're using in air or heat pollution, if you want to say. And I think water and biodiversity and oceans are the next in line, because I think the big environmental problems encompass all of this, that's the whole, how humans have integrated nature in society, And I think people started with energy. And for me, it makes a lot of sense that water is the next, because it's just the next thing.
And how much is this, let's call it futurology, important for what you do? If you see the future, you know how to invest.
I really see that as economic currents, like how things are moving forward. I cannot see the future. I'm not a psychic,
Come on.
But I see, no, I believe so, but I see things going in a certain direction. So you try to catch those currents and see where it goes. And I think that's kind of how I see finance, like, a lot of people are investing, and this is a bit of an old mentality, like you invest, try to protect your money. So you kind of try to, it's like putting your money under your bed, But if something bad happens to your bed, then you lose your money. It's not like money is safe somewhere, and that's the big problem we're seeing in finance at the moment. My approach to it is like, if you see the economy, all these trends as economic currents, suddenly you can design your investment portfolio in a different way, such like a ship, that's can flow on these different currents. So you might not know where it goes, but at least you stay above water. So for me, it's a different way of investing, by trying to stay on the top and not trying to hide in gold or in Bitcoins or that kind of stuff. And it's an alternative, because a lot of pensions now are seeing a lot of issues because, I don't want to spend another hour talking about markets. You probably have something else to do, but I think that's one of the main issue we're seeing in finance, is that so many pensions have liability to the pensioners in 50 years. They've been investing in credit or bonds since the dawn of time. And now those bonds, especially the Swiss bonds, they yield negative yield. So you actually pay the person to lend him money. So my idea is, I come and said, look, you can actually invest in water, because this is going to be a growing sector in the next century. So I'm trying to provide alternatives for these kind of investors.
Basically, you put money within your beds or in gold or in Bitcoin or in bonds if you don't trust any other means to bring you that money back with benefits. So somehow we're doing the same job here. We are trying to evangelize people that they better understand the water sector, and if they better understand it, then probably they invest in it.
100%.
Hey, see, we brought finance and environmental green-minded people together.
Yeah, and hopefully we took something good out of it,
So actually, you mentioned Bitcoin, and again, it's not investment advice, and I don't want you to tell me to invest in Bitcoin, because
I can send you my disclaimer if you want to read it out loud.
No, but I saw from your path that you're also working in blockchain, and blockchain into
carbon sequestration. Yeah. So that's a young startup I'm supporting here in Switzerland, and I think they're doing something fantastic. So what they're doing exactly is, when you have reforestation, conservation, or preservation efforts in nature, so that could be like preserving a forest, that can be reconstructing a forest, that can be a marine protected area, that can be any side of natural park, These nature sanctuaries or zones, they have their own carbon sequestration potence, So these lands, these natural capitals, have a capacity to absorb carbon. And if you can measure it, and if you can monetize it, then you can sell it to big companies that want to offset their emissions, So what I find fantastic in that is that suddenly you create a financial link between nature conservation and global markets or global companies. Suddenly you have global companies that have strategic interest to preserve nature, because it's offset their emission. They can be the good guys that increase their reputation capital. So that creates like a stream, like a river or an income stream directly to the natural conservation in the long term. And since now this has value for these companies, they have an interest in preserving it and not destroying it, So if this forest has value to a company to keep it alive because it's reduce its carbon budget, then it's going to make everything it needs to make sure that stays alive, So that's something I'm pretty excited about, how we can realize the value of nature into the markets and use the market forces to protect it.
There would be so much here to uncover and to dig into it, but
yeah, I can come for season 3 if you want.
I take it on, because actually that's a fascinating topic that we could be spending very easily another hour on that. But finally, finance can do good, blockchain can do good. Hey, turns out we learn things every day.
At the end of the day, I see finance as a tool. It's like a hammer. You can use a hammer to nail down a screw or to break someone's head, So at the end of the day, it's what you do with that.
I think that makes a good conclusion for season 2. I propose you to switch to the rapid fire questions.
Yeah, please.
It's time for the rapid fire questions.
I'll try to keep the questions short, and I'd be happy.
I'll try to keep the answer short too.
Don't worry, I'm always the one which makes it longer than it should.
Maybe we can challenge on that.
What is the most exciting project you've been working on, and why?
For me, it definitely has to be with the Asian Development Bank, and it's a LC Ocean Action Plan to finance the sustainable transition of the ocean in the Asia Pacific. So basically, we had a project we mapped out the entire blue economy. So it's similar to the water sector. You have different sectors like wind, aquaculture. We looked at all the problems, we looked at all the solutions, and we come up with a portfolio of solutions. What are the best thing to fix to make sure that it works afterwards? So the bank had 5 billion, and it was like, how can you make the most impact with that? And that's what we did. So that was pretty cool.
Again, I have to refrain myself because what's the favorite part of your current job?
That's a tough question. I mean, everything. I mean, I woke up in the morning, I'm excited. The whole day passed like this. I want to go everywhere. I wanted to do everything, and all my energy is spent on this. And at night, I just collapse, usually on my couch, you know. But I think it has to be something precise. Is try to come up with a new way of seeing things, a new solution to fix a problem. Pretty much as we've been thinking about this for the past hour.
I'm very excited about the next one because you're a close observer of the market. What is the trend to watch out for in the water industry?
Like the trend? I'm going to say something you don't like. I think it's nature-based solution is sponge cities. Because I think for me, it makes so much sense. You know, like you can have a tech solution with a nature solution together, and it makes so much economic sense, and it makes so much ecological sense that having this sort of nature integrated solution, I think that's where I would go. That's where I'm going to go to.
Okay, so for the one listening here, take a note. Sponge cities is definitely something we're going to cover in the very close future.
It's not investment advice, by the way.
What is the thing you care about the most when you're working on a new project, and what is the one you care the least?
I'd say the first is quality. You know, again, I see myself a bit as an engineer, and every project is kind of like a boat. You know, and I need this boat to make sure that it's robust, that it can be tested on the water. So it should not have no holes. It needs to be, doesn't have to be perfect, you know, you don't have to scratch all the parts, but it needs to float, you know. And that's something I find great pride in my work. If I can design a project or an investment process or some whatever that can run as far as it can without my help, then I see that as a success, you know, because I don't need to come back and fix it.
And what's the one you care the least?
I don't know.
So people always struggle to answer that one. And usually when they answer something, they answer money. They don't care about money. But if you do that and you don't care about money, I guess for you, it's a professional fault.
I mean, you need money to live, you know, as much as you need water to live.
I mean, money in the sense when they work on the project, one of the usual answer I get is we don't look at how much it costs because it's going to bring so much. We better invest the right amount and we're going to be paid off.
No, I wouldn't say that because, I mean, at least for me as an economic guy, money is part of my design, you know? So you cannot just be wasteful with money. You need to find a solution that is workable and that is efficient in terms of reward to the amount of spent, you know? Maybe, I don't know, I mean, if I could redirect the questions, something that bothers me a lot in my work is dealing with HR, for example. As I'm an independent consultant, I can come to a bank to help it with this process. Usually, then I'm not on their book, you know, I'm not on their things, and whenever I need to deal with the everything, I have to deal with HR, and it's always a mess. So,
okay. Do you have sources to recommend to keep up with the water and wastewater market trends?
For me, I get everything from LinkedIn. It's been my main source of everything since 3 years. And I really like to stay up to date by talking to people as much as I'm talking with you right now. So for me, I would say, to go on LinkedIn and connect with many people as possible and have as many good discussion, because I think that's how you get an authentic feeling of what is going on in this industry.
Talking of these many people, would you have someone to recommend me to invite on that microphone?
I would recommend Michael Stanley Gallisdorfer. You know him?
Yeah.
I think
he's on my watch list.
Yeah, cool. You know what? Because we also talked about Sponge Cities. No, I really having great discussion with him on LinkedIn. I really like the way he thinks, and he's really I think he's doing good things. So he wants to do good things in the Great Lakes in North America. And I've seen him also talking about really new solutions, like using oysters for water filtration or that kind of things. So if you want to explore that path, maybe talk to him.
And I've seen you debating with him over curves, AC, DC curves.
That's great. I think we could spend hours talking about this.
Finally, to send you, the warmest regards of people that might have discovered a new way to look at the water market with you, where can I redirect them? To your LinkedIn, to your website?
Sure, yeah. I mean, you can follow me on LinkedIn. I don't have a subscribe button. Actually, I do, actually. I always make this joke with my girlfriend. No, but on my LinkedIn, that's where I'm the most active, and on my website as well. So whitestaginvesting.com.
So maybe my last question, which could have been my first question as well. Why White Stag?
There's many reasons, they're an extremely resilient species. Their numbers have gone down very down in the US since the urbanization, but somehow they were able to adapt, and you can see them a lot in the neighborhood, in suburban areas. So it's a species that just go forward and try to adapt to whatever circumstances is ahead of them.
Which is an interesting analogy to what you do. I get it.
Thanks.
So Nicola, it's been a pleasure.
Likewise, thanks for inviting me. That was really interesting call.
I think we now have to do a sequel episode, but
sure. You know where I am.
Thanks for listening to Don't Waste Water. This podcast was brought to you by GF Piping Systems. Loved this episode? Head over to Apple Podcasts to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. See you next time.